Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello everyone, thank you for tuning in to today's broadcast. This is the Monday, May 18th, 2026 episode of the Marco Dre Show, the only show where the facts are facts and hard truths thrive. What better way to start off this week, ladies and gentlemen, than by making you think, which I always try to do, by the way. And after some consideration, and after reading so many different news articles and listening to so many different pundits and analysts and people speak this weekend about the state of our union, I asked myself this question this morning. And that was, where are we as a nation overall? Are we declining? Are we struggling? Are we subservient? Are we stagnant? Are we growing, expanding, commanding, leading? And so on and so forth. What are we? Where are we as a nation right now? And it was extremely telling to me when I went back and looked at some of the press about President Trump and President Xi meeting last week in Beijing. And one of the things that Trump said outright, it was that our nation was in decline, which tells me everything I need to know. Primarily because President Trump does not speak really much off script too much without a teleprompter in sight. So by him doing so, it tells me exactly what he thinks. And by the way, Xi sees this too. We saw the very limited respect given to President Trump during this 2-day visit. Probably not something I would announce to your number one rival geopolitically, but this is where we are today. But the question remains, why is the United States in decline? What does that even mean? How do we get here? How does the freest nation on earth, a nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all, with free market entrepreneurial ties, small limited government with autonomy of the people, and a constitution that actually limits the government's encroachment on its citizens' lives, begin to decline? How does this all take place? Well, how did this happen? Now, it's not limited to just one event or even one man, really. It's a slow decline over time. However, when I think of, for example, events of American history, several stand out to me that add to this decline of a nation, and this is a nation that is so promising, ladies and gentlemen, that created the greatest civilization the world has ever seen. That is not questionable, that we live in one of the greatest nations ever created in mankind. But some of the things I think about, and I went back and I thought of a couple different things, and I jotted them down. Number one, I would say, one of the first declines of this nation would have to be the Civil War, which was really just simply an invasion by the North, by the way, into the then Confederate States of America over the moral tariff. That's right. The war was over economics, not slavery, as your minuscule middle school textbooks and high school textbooks about history lied to you about. Go figure. And again, if you look at Lincoln's actions throughout the entirety of that war, such as beginning the war without any formal declaration of Congress, calling up militias, spending money not allocated for the war, the naval blockade around Fort Sumter. Then, of course, we had the closure of any free press that spoke out against the war. Okay, Lincoln wasn't too keen on freedom of speech. All right. Closed some 300 news press down. Then, of course, we had tens of thousands of demonstrators that were protesting against the war being arrested and placed under military court hearings, not even civil court hearings, because he suspended habeas corpus. Then later on, ignoring Chief Justice Robert Taney's ruling to reverse his actions that were unconstitutional, we had Sherman's March to the Sea, General Sheridan's Shenandoah Valley campaign, all these things that caused such great devastation to the land, to the factories, the crops, the livestock, and of course private property in and of itself. But what I'm trying to point out here with this, and this is why this is such a phenomenal revelation to me, because what I'm trying to point out to you is something much bigger than just the war itself. This was all about the expansion of powers of the executive branch and the reduction of states' rights. Our founding fathers did not want to see so much power held by one branch of government inside the federal government. They didn't even want the federal government to really be kind of this umbrella over everybody, if you will. they viewed individual states' rights as really leading how the state should be run. That's the way they viewed things. The state should have most of the power over the citizens of their individual states. And by the way, during the Civil War, most people, for example, they held great pride in their state. We have this today, too. People are proud to be from, New Jersey, New York, California, Florida, wherever you live. There's lots of pride where you come from. But back in that day, it was like you asked for, if you were to, for example, ask a Robert E. Lee, they would say, I'm from the state of Virginia. But it was more like they were saying they're from the country of Virginia, if that makes sense. They would kind of refer to their state as like it was their own country. That's how individualistic they were at the time. So it wasn't like, I am from the United States. They would say, no, I'm from Virginia. This is where I am. This is where I'm from. And by the way, if you look at Lee, I've talked to you about him in the past. He was approached by President Lincoln, and he was asked, will you lead the Union Army? To which he said, no, because that would mean I'm going up against my own citizens in Virginia. I will not do that. That's how much honor and courage Lee had. Of course, we know that he's been smeared recently in lots of the press. Absolutely appalling to me, as you very well know. But this is how people thought back then. So there was lots of states' rights, of course, and of course there was lots of pride in that state. But the founding fathers wanted the states to be really the ones closest to the people because that's the state in which you live in. And it makes sense when you think about it. Of course, you always have your federal constitution as well. There's always federal land in different states, but really they didn't want what took place in D.C. to be so focal to your life, especially if you're so far away. And I think that makes the most sense. They wanted the state government to be that was really leading you. And, of course, your values and what have you. But here we go. After Lincoln, we have the consolidation of this unilateral power now continuing to escalate. And again, it's never stopped, as we see presidents today that are always vying for more power just for themselves. So two things right there that are very, very important. We have the reduction in states' rights, and of course we have the executive branch getting more and more powerful, defying the courts, doing things that are completely unconstitutional, which the war was in and of itself, by the way. Anyway, then we go on. Let's move a little bit further in history. Let's move on to President McKinley in the late 1800s, running on positions given him by those that have vast amounts of money and power themselves. He was really our first pay-to-play president. And I'm not saying that he was a terrible president by any means, but think the Rockefellers, think the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, the J.B. Morgans of that time, buying up these candidates' agendas. And some irony behind all that, they hated, by the way, they hated Teddy Roosevelt, who was then governor of New York, because he was an antitrust, anti-monopoly guy. So what did they do? And this is brilliant on their behalf, but to their demise, this took place. They got McKinley to take Roosevelt up as the vice president. And we know that the vice president really doesn't have too much of a job. It's really just, based on the Constitution, you're waiting to become president should that ever need to happen. And, you're the president of the Senate, but you're not making legislation. You don't have any executive power, really. And they didn't want him in anywhere near that role. So they thought, okay, this guy will be, vice president. He'll be out of our way. Everything will be great. But as the story goes, as some of you know, McKinley was then assassinated. And then, of course, they were stuck with Roosevelt as president. And then, of course, he won re-election in 1904. But this was the era, the beginning of the very wealthy with lots of clout starting to buy their politicians. And we see this much today. We see that candidates are throwing lots of money into these electoral races, Congress, Senate, governorships, the White House, you name it. Lots of money involved. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about Thomas Massie's race that's very, very much in the spotlight and the vast amounts of money that have been poured in just to get rid of him because they don't like him. Anyways, so that was McKinley. That was that era. So we're seeing the country changing now. We're seeing, again, more power going to D.C., and we're seeing much more money being thrown at that candidates and the favorability going towards the uber wealthy at the time. Let's move on. Who else can we look at? One of my least favorite presidents of all time, Woodrow Wilson, who should have never become president, by the way, just to begin with. But of course, the Republicans did something extremely stupid. They split the ticket in 1912, which is also how we got William Jefferson Clinton twice in the 1990s, another disaster of a presidency. But what did old Woody do? What did he do? Well, first of all, he gave us the Federal Reserve Bank Act in the very end of December of 1913, when everyone went home for Christmas, right when there was only a couple people there. He had a short quorum, and of course they got this passed through, which he signed into law. This was a plot by the big bankers to create the independent bank called the Federal Reserve, working outside of the government. It's an independent bank. It doesn't answer to anybody. Congress used to set the prices of goods and services, handled the currency. They don't do that anymore. No, they've handed all that over to this independent organization. Now, while this was met with good intentions, stop bank runs, control the government spending, stop any inflation at the time, which was, again, very, very rare, by the way. Ended up doing none of that, by the way, as well, which we would later find out during the Great Depression. And, of course, where we are today. Back then, $1 was $1, though. Back in 1913 and before that, $1 was $1. Today, $1 is only about 2 pennies, give or take. You lose your purchasing power as a result of that, which, again, I've told you several times is a hidden tax. And we could talk about FDR's Exchange Stability Fund Act, right, the Gold Act of 1934, making it illegal to privately own gold domestically, which, again, further devalued the currency. President Nixon taking us off of the Bretton Woods system, not allowing the international trade of the U.S. dollar for gold, which also hit the dollar very hard. We saw that inflation of the 1970s, making it a fiat currency. And again, you could go back in time even further if you really want to. We can look at who took us off the silver standard. That'd be President Grant after the not-so-Civil War with his Coinage Act. So we're taking away these precious metals, which I always told you are rising right now because you're seeing the dollar fall. You're seeing the oil prices go up. You're seeing that affect the currencies. Okay. But if we were on a set standard of money, right, that was based in a precious metal, you wouldn't see this out-of-control inflation. You wouldn't see this out-of-control spending. You would have to live within your means. And that's the point I make with all this. And again, it's not just one president, it's several different presidents over time that really did this to our currency. But what else did Woodrow Wilson do? What else did he give us? Well, he gave us the 16th Amendment, which gave him the ability to adhere to a federal income tax, right? Which was sold as only going to be for the wealthy people, right? It always starts off with that. You hear Mum Dummy in New York City do that. It's only going to be the billionaires, the billionaire tax, right? Well, then it has to shift down once the billionaires flee the area. There you go. But look what a mess this has become. Stealing your wages or your salary directly and suggesting that your income belongs to we, the federal government, not we, the people. And they're always so frugal with your money, aren't they? Pure theft of your money. And for what? More wars? It's certainly not going to the roads and bridges and tunnels. No, not cleaning up the sidewalks. Nothing like that. It's amazing to me that people fall for this nonsense. Anyways, that's the 16th Amendment. That was also, obviously, the downfall of having more money of your own to save, to invest in yourself, and what have you. All that went away with this taxation. Then good old Woodrow Wilson, who was being blackmailed too, by the way, during his presidency. I won't get into that. I'll save that for another day with you. But he got us into the Great War in Europe, which we all call World War I. A war that we had no place or business being in, as we were not attacked by anybody in Europe at the time. A war that claimed 116,000 American lives. Want to know what else leads to decline, ladies and gentlemen? I was thinking about this too this morning. Taking out a generation of young alpha male warriors who are the people that would stand up to this type of tyrannical government that we're talking about today, getting rid of them. Who would beget the next generation are now completely gone. We saw this in World War II. We saw it in Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. The trauma and the disabilities, these brave men, these patriotic men who serve their nation when they return, is absolutely devastating to me. And I've told you before, I'm against war when it's absolutely unnecessary. When that's the last stage you can go to, then war is necessary. But you don't go to war when you're in the middle of talks with a country or in a war somewhere 6,000 miles away just for some reason or for another nation or because you have ties to somebody who wants something there. I mean, that's ridiculousness. What the hell are we doing in Vietnam for all that time? Why is that any of our business? And again, same thing goes with these world wars. And again, Korea, you name it. We have no business being in them. The only argument you really can make in the entire era is war with Japan because we were attacked. But let me go over this with you, too. Most people don't understand this. We had an embargo over Japanese oil. Now, for those of you that don't know, Japan has to import lots of their oil. They cannot function without imports of oil. Otherwise, their economy is going to collapse. What the hell are we putting an embargo on their oil for? What was the purpose of this? Again, because they're in French Indochina was what was said at the time. Who the hell gives a damn? Really, who cares if they're in French Indochina? What the hell do I care? Do you care? Of course you don't. I mean, this is just stupidity again. It's amplifying to assert our power over another country, which escalates tensions, which causes things like Pearl Harbor, for example. This attack that we probably knew was coming too, by the way. But it was good old FDR's way of getting us into the war because we were attacked by them. I mean, no one's denying they attacked us and killed almost, 3,000 men that day, if I'm not mistaken? Devastating our fleet in the region. There you go, though. There you go. And look at the devastating results of World War II. So, we know FDR also expanded the size of government with social programs, right? The New Deal, we were told. It was a great deal, right, folks? No, the old deal wasn't working. So we had to give you a new deal. We had to have government more in your life. So he creates all these different programs, all these different branches of the government. And the government expands. The federal government grows and it grows and it grows. And by the way, none of this cured the Great Depression, by the way. The war did, which is probably why he wanted that to happen. So this socialist who was hiding as a Democrat, FDR, we know that he wanted to pack the courts to get things that he wanted accomplished that he couldn't get through, which is exactly what Kamala Harris now is coming out and saying to us right in the open, folks. Pack the courts, make D.C. and Puerto Rico statehood, get rid of the white supremacist and electoral college so we can win, so we can stuff our ballot boxes more. It's a joke. In the same time frame, too, we have things like the Frankfurt School moving in America. They fled Germany. After Hitler took power, they come to Columbia University, coming from Frankfurt University in Germany. And what do there? They pushed in communism or social Marxism into the school system, which is a way to, again, destroy the fabric of a society. And again, this has greatly trickled down now to the public school system, which I've seen firsthand as a teacher. And this has only gotten worse with the moronic things like the English language is racist, grading scales are racist, America, of course, has to be racist. All men, especially white men, by the way, are evil incarnate. Don't listen to them. And we have to teach elementary school children more pornographic smut in the books in the library to be inclusionary, of course, because that's normal behavior. Don't you think so, folks? It's ridiculousness. Now, originally, public schools were made to promote Americanism. That's what they were made to do. But over time, the people that get in charge, just like anything, they become bigger, and they got the unions moving in, and what have you. And we get the trash we see today. We're the head of one of the biggest education teaching unions. Randy Weingarten isn't concerned with kids not understanding how to read and write and their low test scores and low output. That's not important to her. Same thing with the other one. I forget her name. She's so useless. I forget her name. She's the head of one of the other major education, the teaching unions, I should say. But this is the point. They're not concerned about good grades and kids learning and understanding how to do reading, writing, and arithmetic. Science and history, understanding who we are as a people. That's not important to them. It's collecting more money and putting it into their candidates that want to destroy the country. It's just a process. It's just a cycle, folks. So they're not worried. That's why they wanted the kids to go out and protest ICE recently. They're not concerned about them in the classroom. They could care less about that. They're just going to push them through anyways. That's all it comes down to, unless, of course, you go to a private school. Maybe a parochial school, too. That doesn't mean every public school in America is bad, folks. I know there are some good ones out there still. But by and large, what you're seeing is the breakdown of the schooling system. And when you have a populace that is uneducated, that doesn't care about learning, They just want you to push them through. This is the result you get. And it's been going on for quite some time now. Again, I told you this before, I've seen it firsthand. What they've done is brilliant. They have the union and the administration and the parents going up against the teachers. The teachers are the bad people. So unless you are coerced or cudgeled into giving good grades, you're probably going to get your job taken away from you. You're the bad guy. You're not going to win. It's very, very brilliant on their behalf. I got to tell you. But that wasn't always the way, and that's the way now, though. It has been for about the last 30 years or so. And they've ruined education as a process of this. And this is all part of their big plan. So there you go. So that's why you see the lack of learning, the communistic effects of what they're trying to push on kids now. Not really teaching them real history. And by the way, most of the history you learn, by and large, is a bunch of garbage. Really, when you actually study it on your own, when you see, not books funded by, for example, the Rockefellers, right, who owned lots of the printing houses. And by the way, Ghislaine Maxwell's father owned a lot of these publishing houses too, by the way, that go into their the public school curricula. It's amazing to me. Really is, folks. Really is. Okay. How about Lyndon Baines Johnson? Let's fast forward a little bit again, right? We move through. We'll go on to the 60s, which he was president for much of the 1960s, after JFK was assassinated, where we had the counter-culture revolution. And this was a response to the cultural Marxism that was growing inside the institution. See what I just told you? Had been growing since the 1930s, right? It's growing. You have a socialist in the White House. These policies seem very palatable to most Americans, right? Oh, a New Deal. Oh, great. Oh, New Deal. What the hell does that mean, a New Deal? We don't need a New Deal. We need you to work for us. That's what we needed. But when we do these ridiculous things, there you go. There you go. And, like many things, Marxism growing inside institutions like universities and colleges where they have the radicals become the professors. You see it in Hollywood. You see it in the news media. You see it in these secret societies in America and around the world. But one of the things I think is interesting, too, they don't just use cultural Marxism. They use Maoism as well now. And you see that with the youths. They all call them youths, right? The youths of society, the kids in the streets now, who've been indoctrinated in these public schools to really behave how they are behaving. And again, it all comes down to the family as well, which is destroyed in cultural Marxism and cultural Maoism as well. But I always told you that with the protest happening, that's cultural Maoism. It's not Marxism, it's Maoism. Getting rid of the culture, getting rid of the traditions, getting rid of your habits, changing your behavior. Having you turn in your parents. I mean, this is all Maoism, right? Turn up against that. That's what it all comes down to. Sadly enough, folks. But his Great Society program, which Reagan desperately tried to reverse, added to the social welfare programs. We saw an explosion of this in the 1960s, largely too because inflation was getting out of control as well, while allowing drugs to flood in the country, closure of the state hospitals. Just go look at California and their homelessness problem if you want to see that, and you can thank Pat Brown for that, which turned a civil society on its head in California. You can look at things like the sexual revolution, the hookup culture, rejecting monogamy, waiting until marriage. We could talk about like I just said, the drug revolution, letting the LSD, the psychedelics, marijuana run free, especially into the music scene as well. Then you have the feminist revolution, the Bella Abzugs, the, Gloria Steinems, the Sheila Booth Firestones, or whatever the hell her stupid name was. Yeah, I read about her too recently too. Died alone in a New York City apartment. Isn't that wonderful, ladies? You can look forward to that too if you eschew men. Okay. Environmental revolution, civil rights, anti-war, free speech movement, the Back to the Land, which was rejecting consumerism, the youth revolution, rejecting the 1950s, and life prior to that. So in other words, the family, the structure of life, right? And especially Christianity as a whole. That's what it all comes down to. So you have free speech, obviously a good thing. We want this. That's when you have the Democrats that were smart enough to understand this, especially at places like UC Berkeley, before it went full communist. And, the anti-senseless wars thousands of miles away, which, again, you all know I'm very much opposed to. I'm very much opposed to war unless, of course, it's the necessary point is it's the last thing you have, right? It's the last option you have on the table to secure your country. That's it. Or unless, of course, you're directly attacked. That's it, folks. You don't need those things. Of course, we understand civil rights. Obviously, we shouldn't have a class system here in the United States. Obviously, we saw some offshoots of that were unconstitutional, but of course, civil rights. You shouldn't have, rejecting people in society because of their race or whatever reason. It doesn't matter what it is. So there were good aspects of that, but there are also bad aspects of this counterculture revolution. But all the rest, what a rejection of the American culture. And of course, our traditions. And it's only gotten worse since then. Let me just tell you that much. And another thing, by the way, since we're talking about LBJ, another thing that he did was really, really stupid, which is probably intentional on his behalf. He signs in the Immigration Reform Act of 1965, which I think we should throw out the window today, which began taking people from the third world in larger numbers to immigrate in the United States and to bring in less people from Europe, which had been done previously up until that time. And up until the span of 1920 to 1965, there was immigration was really greatly reduced. And they followed what was called the National Origins Formula. That means they took more people from parts of Europe, which in that time greatly came from mostly Southern Europe. Think Italy, Greece, Spain, those countries. And the rest of there are great people. Don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand me. There are great people from every country in the world. There are people that come here that want to become Americans. They assimilate. They're great people. All walks of life. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. But the problem with this whole thing, when you cannot bring in millions of people in or a million, I should say. I think that's what they shoot for. 1 million people in every single year. You can't do that when you have a welfare program or when you have a wide open southern border, for example. They started to get abused and nothing was done about it. So now you have this bill called the Hart-Celler Bill, and it was sold by the drunkard Ted Kennedy in the Senate, and of course Johnson himself, saying that this will not change the demographics of America. Now, this was just simply Democrats doing what they do best, lying to you. Now, at the time, I think the white European population in the United States was about 90%, roughly about 90% in 1965 when this took place. And we know now the demographics have greatly shifted from that. Now we can talk about things like abortion and what have you, things of that nature that diminish the populations. But they did this because they wanted to change the demographics. They want to bring in a new group of people, which again weakens the American resolve, which any good communist wants to do. So they know they're very smart, these people. Even though they appear very dumb to you, they're very smart in what they do. Because they know in order to take down America, you have to take down America from within. You can't invade America. It's not going to work. Hell, we've invaded Iran. We can't even defeat them. We're one of the most expensive and powerful militaries in the world. We can't defeat Iran. Go figure. It's tough to defeat people that don't want to be defeated, isn't it, folks? But, when I think about this, what do you think we have all these global organizations? We have the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Economic Forum, the Fabian Society, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberger Group, the Atlantic Council, and so many others too, by the way. All these big organizations, right? Remember during COVID? The World Health Organization has decided for us. I'm sorry, who elected the World Health Organization to do anything? Why are we giving them money too, by the way? Again, throwing away more of our tax dollars. For what? Again, all of it's used to weaken national sovereignty, the architecture, the traditions, the demographics, and the identities of these countries. Make no mistake about it. By the way, I've said for a while now, and I think it's long overdue, that we have a 1776 style revolution in the country to the 1960s counterculture revolution right here in America. We don't want George Orwell or his 1984. We don't want that. The digital prisons, The mind control, the indoctrination, the weakening of the economy? No, we don't want George Orwell. We want George Washington. We want our founding fathers. 1776 revolution. So we can govern ourselves freely. Not a bloated, overreaching police state, which we're finding ourselves in today. And it's been a steady decline ever since, though, folks. And it's not improving. And I guess I'll just end my monologue with this, ladies and gentlemen, for you to ponder on yourselves. Let me just put it to you like this. We as Americans today, we've inherited much of the blood, sweat, the sacrifice on many different levels from our founding fathers and, of course, the generations that came before us. We declared that we were independent from Great Britain. These men fought the greatest empire on earth. They gave us the government we have today, our Constitution that prevents government from overreaching into our lives, at least it's supposed to. None of the sacrifice and struggle that they experienced should be taken for granted ever. It should always be honored 100%, especially as we approach our 250th birthday this July, where we declared our independence from Great Britain. And again, the generations of men that came after that built this country up. We inherited something wonderful, something great, something most people don't even get to experience, folks. And I want to make that very, very clear to you, which is why I hate these people that have destroyed the country so much. You know, President Reagan once said very succinctly and accurately, he said, freedom is never more than a generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed down for them to do the exact same. Brilliant, I must say to you, by the way. In other words, if you don't know your founding, if you don't know the history of our country, our Constitution, and why it was allowed to enable us to become the freest and greatest nation on earth, you're doomed to repeat the worst sin of all, destroying your own country. This is why we always must fight for our rights to show up when they are in jeopardy, bar none. There's no excuse for that. Elections do matter. The quality of our candidates matter. And if that candidate is just enriching themselves through insider trading or violating our rights, not doing what they're supposed to preserve our freedoms or our rights and protect our nation as our representation, that's why they are there to work for us. We don't work for them. Then they need to go. But a sleeping, out of touch, uneducated, and AWOL, and lazy, politically, populace, maybe lazy too, physically, who knows, can't do that. If you don't understand what freedom, liberty, and personal autonomy are, why they are important or necessary to preserve a nation under Christian values, which again, this is how our nation is set up. By the way, if you don't like it, you can get the hell out. But you will fall to tyranny and oppression. Make no mistake about it. That's what is going to happen. Which is exactly why the powers that be want these things. They want for you to remain willfully ignorant, staring into your cell phones every single minute of every single day, looking at television screens while you're playing your Xbox or whatever those stupid programs are, while your rights get trampled on and taken away. And I really can't think of anything much, much sadder than that, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen. And on that note, I will stop talking about this because it's very upsetting to me to see this and obviously to witness this decline of our country. But this isn't just indicative of the United States. Don't misunderstand that. This is the West right now that we're talking about, that is being uprooted, that is being destroyed. Not too long ago, I was listening to a Catholic, I believe he's a bishop in Europe. His name is Robert Serra. And one of the things he said, I think he's based in France, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, black man, this is what he said. He said, what I see right now in Europe is very sad. And by the way, I'm not saying this by a quote, it's verbatim, but he said, what I see right now in Europe is very sad. The roots of society are being pulled. We're seeing these nations dying. He goes, and I can't think of anything much more sad than that. And he's absolutely right about this. When a nation loses its identity, when a nation loses its way, when it goes up against its people's rights, it's a very sad thing. And what do the people do as a result? They're not doing what is necessary to maintain those rights. And I guess this brings me to my first line of business today to talk with you about, even though we're halfway through the show already. It's out of Fox News. It says a 66-year-old UK pastor was now arrested while street preaching in London. Oh, don't do that. And said that he is now facing hate speech-related charges for preaching the Bible and speaking out against Islam. Okay, all right. So the country that gave us the Magna Carta, the English Bill of Rights, is now throwing their pastors in jail for speaking in the streets. You don't think freedom of speech is dead in Europe? You don't think it's dead inside of the UK? Take another guess, please. And they call it inciting religious hatred, which he called false. This is Pastor Steve Maley. This is what he told Fox News Digital. He said, the cross of Christ is a message of hope, love, mercy, and reconciliation to a fallen world. How could that be hate? Now, Maley is a gospel singer and the senior pastor of Oasis Church of Watford, England, a town outside of London. For 45 years, the New Zealand native has preached and performed mission work globally. He told Fox News Digital that he often performs famous songs with lyrics altered to convey a Christian message. Now, folks, let me just say this to you. We're seeing in Europe right now, especially the UK. It's very, very troubling. This is under Sir Keir Starmer, who I don't think is going to survive much longer. But what you're seeing in Europe is the realization that their country has been taken from them. 100%. Their borders have been opened up to the third world, of course. Obviously, they've ushered in people that are not aligned with their values. I watched over the weekend, too, by the way. Again, this is why I've been contemplating all these things and pondering what they mean. I was watching in a town in Italy, an illegal alien from, I believe, North Africa, if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I forget where he's from. But he just drove his car directly into many different people in this small town. Now, does anyone think that's appropriate? That somebody comes into your country who feels it's fine to just drive through a small town and drive in and kill people? And so I ask, where is Giorgia Meloni? Why are we not deporting these people from your country? These people don't belong in your country. They don't want to become a part of your country. This is what's so ridiculous about all this. This doesn't need to be happening. And what we're seeing in Europe right now, other parts of Europe, the UK, you can get thrown in jail for preaching the word of God. And again, it's amazing to me. But you're seeing people starting to speak out against this. They've had enough of this. They're proud of their religion, even though religion numbers are dwindling from where they had been in previous decades. But the idea that you will get thrown in jail for just speaking about Jesus in the streets, it's amazing to me. It really is. I mean, this is where we're headed, under the guise of hate speech laws. So they make up a term, hate speech, which again, there's freedom of speech, there's speech, and there's violence. I don't think there's anything called hate speech. But if you're getting arrested because you're offending people online, which I saw in the UK as well, police officer inside a woman's house saying, well, you know, you kind of said this, and then she goes, okay, and so what? What law did I break? Well, you haven't broken a law yet. But what you said was very offensive. You want to apologize. I'm sorry, apologize for what? Now, if you've been a jerk to a family member or what have you, maybe you said something you didn't like, fine, okay. I don't think you need the police to come to your house and tell you this, though. And this is the slippery slope we're on right now. We're at the precipice of this police state, monitoring what you do online, monitoring your digital footprint, if you will. And again, this is all part of their plan to record everything you do. You cannot allow your government to spy on you 24/7. Every word you say, every video you post, video you like, what you view, what you don't view, and expect there to be freedom in your country. You don't have freedom. You have watchers, if you will. And these people can decide to arrest you, throw you in jail. Well, you did something that was a little hateful, hate speech. You said something that maybe a Muslim in your country doesn't like. But what he says he continued to preach and insisted no crime had been committed. This is before he was arrested. He said, you repent to believe on the Lord Jesus Christ and you'll be saved. I've not assaulted anyone. Take these off me. Now they're arresting him as he's saying this. Take these off in the name of Jesus. Well, the female cop, the officer, appeared to be mocking him and responded, in the name of Jesus, get in the car. Okay, so this is the UK for you. Right? These are cops that can't have guns because I guess guns are too scary. And, the knife-wielding lunatics from God knows where can attack people. There's knife attacks up. Rapes are up in these countries. And it's not just the UK. This is Germany. This is Sweden. All over Europe right now. France. Go look at Paris right now. Destroying itself. Because the EU has said, you need to take in these people, these refugees. I'm sorry, you're a sovereign nation. No, you don't. And Maloney needs to get on it. All these countries need to get on this, by the way, and remove these people from the third world who aren't assimilating, who are wreaking havoc in your country. There's no other way around. That's the only way you survive this. And same thing here in the United States, too. Which is why I don't understand why President Trump, by the way, is not doing anything more about the illegal alien problem here in the country. We've only reported about 500,000 people since he took office. And we know we have roughly 40 to 50 million illegals inside the country right now. How does a nation survive that? You don't. You just go look at ancient Rome, the Roman Empire. You don't open up your borders to everybody, folks. It never works out in the end. But that's how you destroy a country from within. That's the only way you can really destroy a country. And we're seeing that in Europe, sadly, right now. Although there are people standing up to this who want to be free, who want to preach Christianity and understand their nation is based off Christianity, as so many nations are. You cannot let third world hordes come into your country. It just isn't going to work out, folks. And again, this is indicative of the left in their country arresting people who are preaching the word of God. We saw this too, by the way, during COVID in Canada. There was a Polish priest who was having his church services still. He said, I came here from Poland to get away from this religious persecution. Here I am getting arrested for having a church service right now. They're throwing me in jail because COVID. What the hell is that? Again, it goes back to the globalist thoughts. What we say on a global scale will be what you do. So when we tell you to close your churches, you will. Otherwise, you'll be arrested. I mean, this is part of the religious persecution we're seeing, mostly against Christians, by the way. You hardly see it against any other religion, really, in the world. But this is the reality of the situation right now. And we need to be aware of this because, like it or not, the UK is about 10 years ahead of us. What they're experiencing right now, we're about 10 years behind them. And I don't think we want people thrown in jail for preaching the gospel in the streets, which we have a right to do. To accept things like Sharia law, which, again, some of these people, not all of them, but some of the people coming from the parts of the Middle East and other parts of the world, they want to push Sharia law on you, and they want to have Sharia law courts, and they want to be governed based on Sharia law. Well, that's not going to mix with Western culture and Christianity. Now, of course, you can come here as a Muslim and be free and live under our laws. I mean, that's fine. I know many people that do that too, by the way, who are great people. Again, don't misunderstand what I'm saying to you. But there are groups of people that want to change the country they go to. That's not how you immigrate to a country. When you immigrate to a country, you assimilate to that country. You adapt to that country. You don't take the way you've lived or your traditions, by and large, and apply them to where you are now. Now, of course, we have freedom of religion in this country. You're free to go to a mosque and free to pray to your God. Jewish, same thing. Buddhist, same thing. Hindu, same thing. But you have a right to come to a country and say, no, this country is going to do exactly what I say. We will have Hindu law or Jewish law or Muslim law. That's not how this country is set up. We are a nation based on, as I told you before, Christian values. There's no other way around that. And I can't say it any other way, so that's how I'll say it to you. But what we're seeing in Europe right now is the approach to limit speech, to reduce your speech, especially if you're professing Christian values or nationalistic values. And I think the UK right now has had enough. God only knows if the men of the UK will stand up and fight against this because, like here in the United States, they need a counter-revolution as well. It's not working for them. It's not working for them in the long shot. Which brings me to my next point, too, by the way. This is very crucial, too. We talk about candidates and, of course, representation. It's not just the news. It says here that the pro-Israel lobby has spent millions of dollars on an effort to unseat Representative Thomas Massie from Kentucky, a Republican, in this primary on Tuesday, tomorrow. So if you know anyone in Kentucky, if you're listening in Kentucky, if you're in his district, vote for Thomas Massie. And I hardly endorse a candidate because I'm really not endorsing him, but what I'm saying to you is that Thomas Massie is one of the few people that will stand up against out-of-control spending. He will stand up for the Constitution when it's necessary. And that upsets a lot of people, even the Republican side, who we should be all about the Constitution as conservatives. Certainly I am. But you have to remember, you're electing a representative, and they're supposed to be exposing things like wasted spending, breaking the law, obviously wars that are unjust, actions by the government that are unjust. We should be talking about this. This is something we should want. This is something we should be praising. And yet we're not doing that for some reason. I can't understand why. Actually, I do understand why. Because we've got pro-interest Israeli groups now that have dropped, it's saying here 9 million, but what I've seen is much, much more than that, by the way. This is probably one of the most costly congressional seats I've seen, probably in history. Probably in history. You have all these different factions throwing money in, and what's it say here? The super PAC supported by President Donald Trump's political operations, which has spent somewhere around $7 million on the race. Altogether, the race has spent some $32 million. Think about that for a second. They really want to unseat him. So why are they trying to unseat him then? That's the question you should be asking yourself. What has Thomas Massie done? The guy votes with the Republicans 91% of the time. Okay, he didn't vote for this war. He voted to release the Epstein files. I think most Americans want that. Most Americans want to see people that have assaulted women and children be sent to jail, never see the light of day again. It all goes back to what we just said at the beginning of the program, during my monologue. You cannot have a group of people that live above the law. They always say, no one's above the law. Democrats say that too. It's a bunch of nonsense. When they say that, they only mean Republicans, of course. But this is no different right now. I've seen the emails. I've read them to you. People talking about heinous acts against women and children. That should be exposed. That should be investigated. That should be looked at. People should be charged. And Thomas Massie came out and said, listen, we want these files released. You ran on this. This is one of your campaign promises. Let's release the files and let's let the American people see what's going on here. What was this man involved in? Who was involved in this with this man? And we know there's many people that are involved in this, many high-ranking people, I guess so. I call them low-ranking people, though, because they're not really high-ranking. They're really scum. Anyone who was involved in it is a piece of trash. They should be treated accordingly. But Trump ran on this, then he came out and said it was a Democratic hoax. You're still worried about Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, of course we're worried about this. Worried about what he was doing. Was he blackmailing people? What is going on here? And Trump's decision, stupidly enough, was to ignore it for a while. And people kept pressing and pressing and pressing. And then, of course, we had the fallout with this. Then he signed the Epstein Transparency Act, and we got a bunch of redacted files. We're still missing 3 million of them. But Thomas Massie wants Pam Bondi to come and testify as to why the files are released in its entirety. Not redacted, in its entirety. And we should be able to see this, folks, because, again, if I wrote some of this stuff to you, illegal actions like what we saw in a lot of these files, I would hope if someone was doing something like this, they would be arrested for that. And if the government got this documentation that people are talking about these crimes, you would hope there would be an investigation into this and justice for these victims. But we haven't seen that yet, and this is why people are very upset, especially with what's going on with these files. But Thomas Massie is not popular, not because he's a rhino, not because he's gone up against President Trump, but because he stands in their way. That's what it comes down to. And tomorrow is going to be a test, and Paul Craig Roberts said this as well in an article he wrote on this topic. He said tomorrow is an election that will determine if we have U.S. sovereignty or not. Can our elections be bought by a foreign pact, who Thomas Massie wants to register as a foreign lobby, which they ought to. And by the way, why do we have a foreign lobby at all invested in selecting candidates to represent we, the American people who live here? I don't think that's out of line to ask that question, do you? If Germany had a pact where they were selecting every single candidate in every single district called GPAC, you'd say to yourself, what the hell is this for? And I would say the same thing. Italian pact. What the hell is this? Why do we have an Italian lobby selecting our candidates for us and throwing all this money behind these people? Telling you how great they are. Oh, okay, great. Meanwhile, what's getting done? What's getting done right now? Ask yourself that question. What is Congress doing right now? Not much of anything, I'd have to say. Kicking the can down the road? Probably. So this is going to be interesting to see if Massie survives this. We're seeing things on apps like Polymarket, which we know Don Jr. sits on the board of, by the way. But Massie's outspoken about what's going on. Again, he doesn't take money from AIPAC, so therefore he's a foe. And Massie has said, though, he's not against Israel. He simply said that it's incorrect to equate criticism of the policies of a foreign government, which I think we all can criticize, right? The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu does not equate to anti-Semitism. That's what he said specifically. And again, most people, I don't see why we can't criticize a foreign government. What policies they're doing. We can criticize every government, but Israel's, again, it's ridiculousness. That's why most younger Americans, I still consider myself a young American. I am a young American. You know what? I am a young American. We're not buying this crap anymore. We have the right to speak out against what we see and what we saw on the internet. What we hear from some of the politicians in Israel is concerning. With the actions they've done, what's happening in southern Lebanon, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in the West Bank. Why is that off the table? In a nation where we have freedom of speech, our First Amendment right. And the government should not be taken that way. And a foreign government shouldn't be taking it away from us either. We shouldn't have any foreign money coming into this country. At all. At all. And we'll see tomorrow if the people of Kentucky's 4th Congressional District wake up to the fact they're being bought off by a foreign lobby. And if Thomas Massie will remain successful, I pray to God that he is. He's one of the few people that really speak up for we the people. That's the way I call it as I see it, folks. That's the way I see Thomas Massie. He can't be bought, so if he sees something wrong, he goes for it. Doesn't mean he's perfect. I don't think anybody's perfect, but, when we're talking about war or the Epstein files or Israel's influence on our politics, what Israel's doing, if you're speaking out against things that we all know are true, by the way, is Thomas Massie really a rhino? I don't think so. I think he's a constitutionalist. That's the way I see him. And again, I tell you what I think. Maybe you think differently about it. Well, he doesn't say everything that Trump wants. Okay. What's the point of having a Congress if all they do is just simply kowtow to the president? We don't need a Congress then. Let's send them all home. We could save a hell of a lot of money off this. But I digress. Anyways, we talk about our sovereignty. Let me go over this article with you as we approach the end of today's program. I don't went by fast today, folks. I apologize for that. I wish I had 2 hours with you instead of just 1. This is out of the Federalist. We're talking about our sovereignty. We're talking about President Trump's visits to Beijing. It says here, when President Donald Trump descended the escalator in June of 2015, and I remember this moment, he reminded Americans of something many of their leaders had forgotten, that our country has tremendous potential. We have tremendous people. He said that. And we all loved it. Trump 2015 was fantastic. This is why I don't understand how we are in the situation we're in today. I think many people believe that too. He's right. And by the way, we have many tremendous, talented Americans, regardless of our crappy public school system too, by the way, folks. Lots of promise, lots of vision, ingenuity, resourcefulness. Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. But why is he now talking about bringing in 500,000 Chinese nationals on student visas to take the place of American citizens? What would you think about that for a second? Why would we do that? Remember he told Laura Ingraham that. She said, well, we have many talented people. He goes, no, we don't. So the question I would ask you as the president, why don't we have so many talented people then? We can't find 600,000 talented students to take these positions in admissions in schools across the country. We're going to give it to Chinese nationals to go back to China to use those ideas of which our country has. Something's not right here, folks. Now, he told Sean Hannity on Thursday, I don't want any students is a very insulting thing to say to a country. He's referring to China, of course. As if not insulting China should ever be a top priority or a consideration on which you base your policy decisions, I would have to say. But he goes on to comment, if you don't have those students, good students, by the way, if they want to see a university system die, take 500,000 people out of it. The ones that won't be hurt are the top schools. The top schools will do just fine. But your lower schools, the ones that don't do quite well, those schools, they'll be dying all over the place. Well, first of all, if it doesn't really mean much to go to college anymore, which, by the way, as I mentioned to you, 34% of students only use their college degree today, meaning that the other ones that get these degrees probably don't need it, then what the hell do I care if they go up and under? It only matters if it's useful. And if we have a university system that doesn't mean anything, why do we have this? Why are we getting students in debt? For what? Why are we taking the top tier students in our country and saying, thanks for applying, but no thanks? We got to bring in Chinese nationals. Sounds like someone has the upper hand in somewhere else, doesn't it, folks? I would say so. He's worried about insulting Xi by saying we're going to have American students take the place of 600,000 Chinese nationals who are looking to bring us down. It's a big problem to me, I'd have to say, folks. But this is Trump speaking out loud right now. Now, we can talk about national security risk. We can talk about, again, the future of American students. We're forced to take a seat to somebody else. Again, if we have room in our schools for everyone that is able to keep up with the curriculum and can meet these standards, the high standards should be, in a top-tier university or even a four-year school, and there's room for other students, then we could say, okay, we have X number of seats available. If your students can pass the criteria, we'll consider bringing them in. Not 600,000 of them. And by the way, let me just tell you too, by the way, they're investing in lots of mathematics, lots of science in China right now. What are we investing in? I don't even know we're investing in our public schools anymore, to be honest with you. Cultural Marxism? LGBTQ studies? I don't know what we're doing. Really, we should be pushing the STEM classes, the science, technology, and what have you. That's what we should be pushing on our kids. Entrepreneurship. We're not doing any of that anymore. Certainly not in our public schools. Which is why maybe we need the 600,000 because that's a problem. But if Trump sees that problem, let's fix the problem here at home. Let's fix the public schools. We control them. The government controls them. So I think it's a bizarre take from an American first president to say we're going to bring in Chinese nationals that are going to be displacing Americans. And I think that's something Americans want to hear too, by the way. That, your kid needs to take a backseat to this kid from, Wuhan, wherever he's from. I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right he's allowing them to purchase farmland here in the United States. I really don't like that as well. But this is where we are, folks. So there's really no way around it. All right. So where are we now? Let's take a look at Trump right now. And we're seeing his approval ratings double digits higher than satisfaction with Democrats. Look at this right now. We've got to look at Trump's approval ratings. They're plummeting. They're plummeting. And probably because of a lot of the rhetoric he's pushing out right now. 37%. Look at this. He's got a 37%. What is this? A second-term low as voters reject his decision to go to war with Iran and express deepening anxiety about the economy. Yeah, well, no kidding. None of this is popular. None of this is America first. I bet if you took a poll, how many of you want 600,000 Chinese nationals taking seats in universities that your kid would probably maybe get? I think most people would be dissatisfied with that. Don't you think so? Especially your next up kin who wants to take you out of the status of the greatest world superpower. 44% of Democrats describe being unsatisfied with their party, compared to 23% of Republicans. It's not the party, it's the policy position. It's not our values as Republicans. It's the stance we're taking on some of these issues, with the economy and especially this war. Democrats lead the generic 2026 midterm election ballot 50% to 39% among independent voters, which we need, by the way. So they have about an 18% stretch there for their gain in that. It says here Trump's economic liability only, well, look at this, 64% disapprove of his handling of the issue versus 33% who approve. That's a 31-point difference right now. On cost of living, he faces an even worse poll, a 41% spread. Broader economic sentiment has sharply darkened. Look at this. It says the share of voters rating the economy as poor jumped 11% since January of this year, reaching nearly half of the voters at 49%. Only 18% rate the conditions as good. Even among Republicans, half describe the economy as fair or as poor. Folks, this is what happens. And again, I say this to you bluntly. I say this to you. This is a nation that is not taking the economy seriously. And if Trump is not taking the economy seriously, how does he expect people to go out and vote for him? It's simply not going to work, folks. He's got to come back home. He's got to stop this war, which I fear is going to escalate very soon. We'll talk about that more tomorrow. But he's got to work at home. Focus on the domestic issues first before you work on the foreign policy. That's all I've got to say about that. Otherwise, we're in lots of trouble this November. That'll do it for today's show, everyone. Thank you again for being here and sharing the show with others. I appreciate you so much. Make sure you're staying prepped always. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you back here tomorrow for more groundbreaking news on the next Marco Dre Show. Until then, be good, stay busy, and God bless.